Money is one of the most contentious parts of anyone's marriage. We're going to listen in today as I ask four of America's top money and marriage experts, how can money talk transform your marriage and your retirement? Your thoughts, feelings, and behavior about money have a lot to do with your thoughts, feelings, and behavior about your marriage and even your spouse. At least it does for me and my wife, and I bet you're right along with us there. I was reading an article in the AARP magazine just talking about this, where it says you should open up your marriage about money, right? You should have a much more open, transparent talk around money with marriage. So I decided to put together 5 steps that you can take to have better money talks with your spouse. That way you can have a better marriage, hopefully a better retirement as part of that. And I interviewed 4 experts to go through this. So first we're going to have Art and Sarah Rayner. They're going to talk about the first 2 steps, which are to take time to discover your own money and life goals. It's important to start there with how you feel. And then step 2, which is to learn the money story of your spouse.
They're going to have different ideas than you about what money means to them and where they want to go with that. And so those are some good starting questions on, hey, where do we want to see ourselves in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 50 years from now? And how can we prioritize our money to meet those milestones along the way?
Yeah, I put together a book called The Marriage Challenge. And in the book, I talk about the money stories and money personalities. And so your money story is your experience with finances growing up. You know, what did you see in your household? How did your parents handle money? Did they talk about money? Was it a volatile subject, or was it a subject that was more celebrated? What was your story? What was your experience? That has a profound impact on how a person views their finances later on. I was just meeting with a couple shortly before this recording. And the gentleman was he was adopted, and so he always had this. He admitted he always had this fear of abandonment. Now he remembers a very specific moment in his childhood when someone told him that he could not, that his parents would not buy him an ice cream cone because he was adopted. And for some reason in his mind, that had a profound impact on him, so that later on in life, he would be incredibly generous to everybody to his own detriment. And the reason why he was so generous is because he wanted to make sure that nobody else felt that abandonment that he had felt. So it had a profound impact on him later on in his life. So you need to know your spouse's money story. You know, how did they grow up? What did they experience? And because that'll help you understand why they think the way that they think right now about their finances, and maybe understand what they're chasing after or what they desire to chase after with their finances.
Yeah, I like how you're talking about the money story, especially trying to get each other's money story. It's probably just even helpful to think of your own money story, but what a impactful conversation to have with your spouse of, let's talk about each other's money story. I mean, isn't that kind of part of any good marriage, is learning more about each other? And of course, you'll probably learn more about yourself too while you're talking about that. Just because you want to talk about money doesn't mean your spouse wants to talk about money. Some of that might be from just their personality, maybe how they are raised. Sometimes it has to do with some societal reasons on why it's hard for especially women sometimes to talk about money. Here's Marcia Mantell talking about the third step, which is understanding that it might be difficult for you or your spouse to talk about money and what you can do about that. Our lips are sealed. And so what do you think is causing that, and how can we adjust that situation?
I have a wonderful colleague in the industry, Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, and she talks about breaking money silence. That even today, of all the things we talk, who would ever think we would have seen the kinds of ads on TV we see today for healthcare products, for various drugs, and all of this health stuff? And women do talk about menopause and mammograms and how important it is to, keep up with our health. But man, we don't talk about money still. And I think it's that, well, a number of things. One, we weren't socialized for it. We weren't educated about money. Anybody, not men and women. It's not something that's part of the curriculum for most of us, though for the youngest kids, maybe we're making some progress, but not the Gen Xers, not the boomers, not even the millennials. My kids are millennials, and they had no finance type courses in high school and so forth. So we don't talk about it in education. We generally don't talk about it at home. And I think amongst our peer groups, when we say we need to talk about money or break money silence, everybody thinks that means I can ask you how much you make. And that is the least thing that we want to talk about. We want to talk in concepts and, our budgeting, for example, that's a big one. Do you stick to a budget? Like most people would tell you, well, I don't have a budget. Right there, we have a problem. Do you have credit card spending? Just listening to the president's address last night, credit cards charging such high fees if you don't pay your credit card on time. And he's, he calls them junk fees, trying to get rid of some of that. But what it illustrates is how ill prepared we all are for the complexities of living today and buying things successfully. So we don't talk about any of that stuff. We'd rather talk about, the latest hot show or the coolest Netflix show or what's on sale, at the latest online shopping or what we got on Etsy.
Well, and a big part of the money is that once you have that kind of figured out, you can do all those things. Maybe if the money part isn't your cup of tea, if that's if you're the non-financial spouse, well then knowing enough and getting it right, kind of coming in on the times that are important, like the Social Security decision, or finding out about just how the money is set up is important, so that you can go do the things that you have more of a care for, that are maybe the more fun parts of life. Marcia talked to our step 4, which is that you don't always have to do everything together, but you should at least do things with your money openly and be transparent with your spouse.
The Freedom Fund actually is an invention from my husband, Dan. Dan and I got married very young, and it's always been our money for decades. But at one point, I was getting bonuses when I worked in big corporate America. And I came home one day and told Dan I was getting a bonus and I wanted that money. And he said, of course, it's our money. What a silly thing to say. I said, no, I want it for just me. And we had a battle for months that went on. Neither of us had ever had individual accounts. I wanted to actually set up an individual registered account, just the Marcia McDonald Mantell. And he was not happy. There were things we needed to pay off. I wanted to save it, blah, blah, blah. One day he got up in the morning and he said, all right, here's what I think. I don't think we should have your money and my money, but this is important to you. So why don't you set up your Marcia Freedom Fund? And the reason he named it that, it had a specific goal. I wasn't just hogging money because there was some money coming in the house. I wanted to be able to quit my job in corporate America. It was very, very stressful. We had 2 children. And if I quit my job, we'd have to sell the house. We weren't going to sell the house. That was not one of our personal goals. But I just couldn't walk off the job. So the plan was to bank my bonuses until I had enough to pay for 1 year that I could step out of corporate America, figure out what I was going to do, and move on. So money to me has always been, it always comes tagged with an expense, but with a thing I want to buy or a thing I want to do with it. It's not just, and Dan and I are very different. Money is fungible, he'll often tell me. I said, no, it isn't. It goes into a bucket because it has an identity. And that money, that Marcia Freedom Fund, was truly meant for me to quit my job. So the end of the story is I did quit my job. I saved up for 6 or 7 years. I quit my job. And 1 month later, I started Mantell Retirement Consulting. And I had a contract in hand. So I never got my year off. We still have, we call it the MFF. We still have the MFF. It's been invested. It can be for, one of our girls for their weddings or for something we want to do, a big extravagant family trip or something one day. But the power you feel when you have your own bucket of money, it can't be replaced by anything else. It's incredibly powerful, and you own it.
Now that you've gone through the first 4 steps and maybe the idea of setting up that freedom fund like Marcia talked about, or even different accounts, it's not right for you. Maybe that's not the case. It is still important, though, that you've talked it through, you figured out how you're going to approach money, and then you might be hitting retirement or you're investing and you want to work with a financial advisor. You need to find a couple-friendly advisor. I remember meeting with someone a few years back. She said that her previous advisor, she was the investor, all the money was in her name, and yet when the advisor would call their house, right, this is back when they had house phones, she would pick up the phone and he would say, "Is your husband home?" And then he'd talk to her husband about what to do with her money. It's just ridiculous. So that's how this person was going through it. I've got several other clients where the one spouse doesn't want to really be involved with the money. And while I want to respect that decision, right, they just don't really care too much about the money, I want to make sure they're aware of what's going on. So we always, in our office, email both clients, even if it's just the one person's name, just the one person is the one that responds or even shows up to the meetings. You want to make sure that the both spouses are aware. I'm sending out both spouses the summary of what's going on with their money. So here's Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, who is the author of Breaking Money Silence. She's giving you some tips on our fifth step, which is finding a couple-friendly advisor.
If you are currently working with an advisor and you're not happy with how it's going, you can verbalize and let them know that you want to have both of you included, and that when you noticed, hey, I noticed that sometimes you address my husband or send emails to my husband, it'd be really great if you would CC me. So you can, if there's enough in that relationship, work with the advisor to help and see if they can become what I call couple-friendly. When you're looking for a new advisor, I would ask specifically, how do you work with couples? What is your couple's philosophy? In other words, how often do you want to meet with both of us versus one of us? When you do financial planning, if you do financial planning, how do you incorporate, both our values, goals, and dreams? And then, is this something that you're willing to work on with us? And so you can find couple-friendly advisors. But even me, right? So I'm in a situation where one of the books I wrote was how to give financial advice to couples. And I end up working with a very couple-friendly advisor that we chose and we're thrilled with. But initially, they weren't copying me on Actually, they weren't copying my husband on the emails. And so sometimes it's just training people that it's really important to include both of them. And even though I don't think my husband reads probably 2/3 of those emails, it sends a message. You are both important. And he does jump in when he needs to. And he actually jumps in with a totally different perspective than mine, which is really helpful. So I think having that conversation up front as you're interviewing advisors is really important. And then making sure, if you're currently working with someone, that they're willing to work on working on the couple relationship, not just the individual relationship.
So if you're thinking about retirement and you're married, you've probably been married for quite some time. Or you might be newly married and you've already got a few decades of your money patterns on how you approach money on your own, or maybe how you approach money from your previous marriage. When you plan for retirement, don't forget it's not just the numbers and the money, it's how you feel about the money and the numbers, and how your spouse feels about the money and the numbers, and how you work on that together. So we have these 5 steps to help you use the money talk to transform your marriage and help you get ready for retirement. Those 5 steps are to think of your own goals first. Think of what you want to do with your money. Then learn your spouse's money story. You might be thinking, wow, I wonder why they talk like money about that. Why do they keep acting that way? It's probably based on their money story of how they grew up and how they feel about money. Understand with step 3, it might actually be hard for your spouse to talk about their money. Maybe there's a personal reason or a kind of society reason around gender, perhaps. We had Marcia Mantel talk about that. Marcia also said you might want to openly set up different funds where maybe each of you have different accounts. And maybe that's not right for you. But step 4 is to set up your accounts on purpose and know how those accounts are set up for each other or even individually. And then Kathleen Burns Kingsbury helped us with step 5 of finding a couple-friendly advisor. Step 5 is to work with a couple-friendly advisor. And all four, because we had Art and Sarah Rayner together, they all have books. And so the first 3 people that email me, podcast@keilfp.com, podcast@keilfp.com, let me know if you would like to have Breaking Money Silence by Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, or Retirement Planning for Women by Marsha Mantell, or Art Rayner's The Marriage Challenge. Let me know. Happy to send you those books for the first 3 people that email me. I'll have links in the show notes and the YouTube description for everyone else. Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions. Hi, I'm Jeremy Keil, owner of Keil Financial Partners. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients get more income, pay less in taxes, and avoid big retirement mistakes, make sure to go to keilfp.com. That's KEILFP.com.